to address the county board. Is there anyone? I'm not sure. Ace Tray Access Max. There. I don't know who that was. Is there anybody out on in the phone system or wishing to speak to the county board this morning? Seeing nobody or anything, we'll proceed. Item 3, approval of the county board minutes. 3.1 is closed session September 28th, and 3.2 is county board September 28th.
I'll move to approve 3.1 and 3.2.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Jacobs, second by Commissioner Meyer to approve the meeting minutes from closed session September 28th, county board session September 28th. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, approved. Item 4, acknowledge receipt of approved committee meeting minutes. 4.1 is the Planning Commission from July 15th, 2021, and 4.2 is the Board of Adjustment, July 15th, 2021.
I'll move to acknowledge 4.1 and 4.2.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Jacobs, second by Commissioner Olson to acknowledge the receipt of the approved committee meeting minutes, Planning Commission, July 15th, and 4.2 Board of Adjustment, July 15th. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, approved. Consent comments and approval of the agenda. Commissioner Kavesi?
I just have a committee report at the end.
Commissioner Meyer?
Nothing for me.
Okay, Commissioner Olson?
Nothing for me.
Commissioner Jacob?
Nothing for me.
Okay, Mr. Fritz, anything?
Nope.
To change?
I'm good.
Okay, all right. And I just one announcement. All right. With that, we would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Also move. Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Meyer, second by Commissioner Kavesi to approve the agenda as presented. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, approved. Mr. Fritz, would you read that in for the record, please?
Okay, so consent business committee recommendations. 6.1, approved conditional use permit for Joanne Groth and Dylan and Kristen Antoff to allow single-family dwelling of less than 40 acres. 6.2, approved recommended 2022 Recorders Technology Funds budget. 6.3, approved conditional use permit for William and Carol Ebert and McCaw Tracy Fedeke to allow single-family dwelling on less than 40 acres. Department recommendations. 6.4, approve HBC American Rescue Act broadband expansion professional services agreement. 6.5, approve Minnesota Department of Human Services Amendment number 2 for grant contract number 173184, Children's Mental Health Respite Care Services. 6.6, approve renewal of contract to provide treatment facility transportation for Winona Health. 6.7, approve state of Minnesota grant to fund driving under the influence enforcement deputy. And 6.8 is confirmed payment of disbursements. That concludes the consent agenda.
I'll move to approve the consent business as read.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Jacobs, second by Commissioner Meyer to approve the consent business as read. Any discussion? Just a quick comment to the Sheriff's Department for obtaining a grant. Whoever worked on that, thank you. That will, okay, thank you. All right, that should help us out. That will be an additional person to patrol. Okay, all right, so that's an asset to our community.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much. Now, the key is to get it approved year after year after year, not just a one-time deal. So that'll be the goal.
Karen's been very persistent in that, also applying for that grant for the past 7 or 8 years. Finally got it this year.
It's finally our turn, probably our turn or something. Okay, but no, thank you. Thank you for that work. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, approved. All right. 7.1, general business. 7.1, receive the Southern Minnesota Regional Medical Examiner Office 2020 annual report. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Sheriff, Commissioners. Thanks for having me. It's been now a couple of years since I've done a report, so go through last year's data, and if you have questions as we go through, don't hesitate to jump in. All right, you could go to the next slide. So just as a reminder, this is a jurisdiction, the southern.
Excuse me. For those that don't know you, could you
Oh,
introduce
sorry,
yourself?
I'm sorry, yes. So my name is Dr. Ross Reichert, and I'm the medical examiner for Winona County and the chief medical examiner for Southern Minnesota Regional Medical Examiner's Office.
Thank you.
And so the dark blue counties are the ones in which we are provide the full medical examiner services for. And I'm the medical examiner for those counties. And then the light blue ones are counties that we provide autopsy consultations on. So we're really covering, a good portion of southeastern Minnesota. The next page is our staff. Myself, Dr. Quinton, and then we have a new member of our staff, a guy named by the Dr. Ross Zumwalt, who brings a lot of experience to our office. He was the chief medical examiner for the state of New Mexico for over 20 years. There'll be 3 of us, and then we have actually a 4th that'll be joining us next July. Who's finishing up their training this year. Monica Kendall is our supervisor, assisted by Courtney Hyman. And then really the heart and soul of the frontline folks for our team are the local investigators here in Winona County. So they're the ones that are responding 24/7, 365 to the calls here. And so I can't say enough about their importance to the medical examiner's office and death investigation system. And then at the bottom you see a list of other groups of individuals, Office of Decedent Affairs, pathology reporting specialists, et cetera. And that really represents our administrative teams and helps sort of pull this data together as an example. And it's really the administrative infrastructure that supports it. So a robust team supporting the medical examiner's office. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. So this is the number of cases that were reported to us. We obviously much prefer to have cases reported to us and have a chance to investigate them and ensure that there's not something that we need to pursue further. So our chance to make sure they really fall under our jurisdiction. We had 43 postmortem examinations, 34 of which were complete autopsies, 6 were external examination, and 3 were partial. 42 were certified as without doing a postmortem examination. And so these are cases that would fall under our jurisdiction because they're not natural deaths, but they're often very well documented. So someone falls, they break their hip, they decline over time. And so it's well documented what happened to them, but it's still not a natural death. And so 248 would decline in jurisdiction. So again, we'd much rather have things reported to us and then decline jurisdiction. So if you click one more click, you'll see that about 85% of the deaths in Winona County are reported touched by the medical examiner's office. So we're, looking at lots of different cases.
Is that normal?
Yes.
Okay.
It surprises people, which is why we include it. Hospice deaths are reported to us, and then all the other deaths are reported in the decline jurisdiction. So it surprises a lot of people how much we're doing. So.
Thank you.
Next slide. So just a little bit of refresher of what all is on the death certificate. I know in the last few years now, there's been a lot of discussion about death certificates. So primarily what's going out to the families is the cause of death. That's the reason why someone died. The manner of death is the circumstances. And there's 5 of those categories. Then basic questions that are important public health information. Did an autopsy occur? Did it occur at work? Where did it occur? Et cetera. So that's information that's being collected on the death certificate, but it's not going to the family's death certificate. It's not on the family's death certificate. And so just as a reminder, the families use this to sort of close the loop of what happened to the relative and also for the personal affairs, but also this then rolls up to the Minnesota Department of Health, and then that goes to the CDC. And so, this flow of information is really starting with our local death investigators and flows all the way through this pipeline. And that's where we see that data. This is the number of COVID deaths, the number of drug overdose deaths. That's the workflow. Next slide. So getting a little bit into the categories here, the details of our data. So this is the manner of death. As I said, there's 5 different categories. You can see the vast majority of our cases were natural. We'll go into each category a bit. Yes.
Well, you just mentioned the number of COVID deaths, and when I looked through there, I didn't see the word COVID in there. I don't think anywhere. So is COVID natural, or what's COVID considered?
So COVID would be considered a natural death. So I was just saying that's how that data, like when you see the number of deaths attributed to something like COVID or drug overdoses, that's the workflow. Now they're pulling off of the death certificate. So I'll show you where the COVID deaths actually fall in our data under the natural deaths in just a couple of slides, actually. So the vast majority of cases was natural. 41 accidents, 7 suicides, and 1 homicide. We go to the next page, the next slide. So this is natural or deaths by unnatural causes. Let's see. We go to the next slide.
Yeah, next slide. There.
There we go. Okay, and so if you eliminate the natural deaths, and so then this is all the manner of deaths together, and you'll see that the leading cause of death here is falls. Really, it says jump or falls, but it's really falls, and that kind of surprises a lot of people. These are typically elderly individuals that have other conditions. They fall and they hit their head, or they break a bone or something like that as they climb. And that's followed then by motor vehicle accidents, and then and drug overdoses.
So what do you attribute the spike in 2022 on the jump falls?
I don't know. I was thinking about that this morning and actually yesterday afternoon, but it is definitely an increased number. I mean, it's 1 year, and so there is some variability from year to year, but it is definitely a significant increase. It's probably worth looking into. So I anticipate that we'll, over the next decade or two, we'll continue to see an uptick in those as our population ages.
Jack the Tripper.
Well, is it, and again, I apologize, is it broke down by age category?
Yes.
Okay, was that slide
No,
No.
we don't have the falls by age.
age? So
but
I'm
we
wondering
have
if
the-
it's
We have the deaths by age.
age, yeah,
And I can look into that.
yeah. Is it the elderly that are,
It is, yeah.
It
It's
pro-
typically
I'm-
the elderly
that are falling and that causes other problems and,
Yeah, I'll have to look at it. And sometimes we do have other
A breakdown.
fall deaths in Winona, like other areas because of the bluffs.
Mm.
And so sometimes we do have some of those, but I'll have to look specifically.
Thank you.
So if you go to the next slide. So there's a suicide by means. We had 6 firearm suicides, 1 other, and that was smoke inhalation, where someone intentionally set their house on fire. Next. So this is just as a comparison to sort of benchmark against other counties in southeastern Minnesota and the national rate. This data is like the national data is a year behind. It's 2019. This is our 2020 data. And something to be just to be aware of as we go through these kind of slides is that we're doing relatively small numbers, so that small change can really impact how it looks. You can see where Winona falls just below the average. And this is this data is based on where the county of injury occurred, which is important because so if someone gets injured in Winona County that gets transported to Homestead County and dies there, that death is recorded in Homestead County, but in this data we record the origin of the injury, so that way we know what's happening in the county.
What do the numbers mean?
That's the number of cases.
But so it says 15, and then on Winona it says 7. So that's what I'm not understanding. It shows the bar going up to 15 on the left side, but then the 7, it says 7.
That's per 100,000.
That's,
Yeah.
that's the number, and that's the per 100,000. That's the rate.
So I should
read
reconsider.
under suicide rate per capita.
So that's the rate per capita.
Yeah.
And that's the absolute number.
To normalize it for population change differences between
Yeah, so
counties.
there were 7 within the rate per 100,000 is.
Which would equate to 15 per, okay, because we have 50,000.
Right.
Ish.
Do we have this data by age group somewhere?
We can pull that data. I don't have it pulled out here, but yeah. I don't think we-
It's
no.
not in the packet. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we don't have it by age, but I can look at that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
So the next slide, excuse me, is homicides, and so there was one in 2020. Next slide, so this is just the rate per 100,000. Again, this is from all of them where the injury occurred, and then per 100,000. So we're across our region significantly below the average and definitely below the per capita injury. Next category is accidental deaths by type. And so you'll see again, fall, leading cause of death. The accidental category, followed by poisoning or drug overdoses, which we'll break down in a little bit more detail in the next slide or two, followed by motor vehicle accident and asphyxia. The one other on that was a blunt force head injury. So the next is accidental deaths by vehicle crashes. So this is the actual number of deaths per, on one slide behind you, but number of deaths in Winona. So that's different than the per county ones versus the how many occurred in the county, the injury occurred in the county. So that's why you see a difference between the actual deaths in the county versus how many where the injury occurred.
So what is the other category? Is that ATV or?
That's like ATV, snowmobile, etc. So the next one is a heat map of the type of vehicles that were involved. So that's pedestrian versus vehicle versus train, ATV, etc. So you can start to get a sense of this. Is one nice thing about having the year-over-year data. So this is now 6 years worth of data tracking where those accidents occurred. And then on the next slide is the number of, so this is the actual number of deaths. And so you'll see here that there's there's two accidents in Winona. The one, the person actually died in Steele County in Owatonna, but the injury occurred here. And so this is where the actual deaths and the accidents occurred. Okay, next slide. So this is the motor vehicle fatality rate per capita. You'll see that we're significantly below the average. So there was 2 deaths with the injury and / accident occurred in Winona again, and the third death with the injury occurred in Steele County, but then they died here. All right. So next is deaths related to drugs or poisoning. Poisoning is the public health terminology for drug overdose. So there were 4. One was methamphetamine, prescription and over-the-counter medication. We had meth and cocaine, heroin, meth, and prescriptions mixed, and then one just mixed of numerous prescription medications. So this is pretty typical of what we're seeing, where you see more and more mixed drug overdose deaths. You see methamphetamine and heroin and combined, even with fentanyl as well. So these are toxicology more complex and testing more expensive, to be quite honest.
So if a person's under the influence of alcohol and has a car accident and dies, is alcohol reported here, or is it just the car accident?
Just the car
Car
accident.
accident.
So we're capturing that data, and that will be captured and gathered, but it's not listed on the death certificate, which is where we're pulling this information from. Next slide. This is the drug overdose per capita. Again, small numbers, but significantly below the average across this region and dramatically below West Virginia, sort of the pinnacle of the drug overdose deaths that occurred. On the next slide is the deaths by natural causes. You'll see that cardiac is the leading death, and typically typical across the country. It's also followed by cancer. And then you'll see here, there's a big jump in the pulmonary deaths, and that's a reflection of the COVID deaths that are died from COVID pneumonia or complications of COVID pneumonia. Neurologic disorders is next, and so this is relatively stable in some of the other counties. It's climbed upward. I anticipate in years to come it will climb as the population ages. Neurologic risk factors for dementia, stroke, cerebral vascular disease also with age. So I anticipate that to potentially grow in years to come. And then the next page is deaths by age group. And so this is one area which is sort of good news for our data reporting. And in the last few years, we've had to expand further out for age. You know, it used to just sort of be greater than 65, and now we're at 95 plus. And so that's an interesting and positive shift. The further you see that to the older age group, and less of those spikes that you see in the 1 or 18 to 25-year-old, that's a reflection of natural deaths. We start seeing peaks in the younger population. That's telling you they're not dying of natural diseases because they are typically dying of accidents. They're dying of accidents, homicides, and suicides.
We go back to the pulmonary
Yep.
one on the previous slide.
Yep.
So in 2020, you show 52 deaths in Winona County. Now, most of our COVID deaths were in 2020. So I'm just, and they were, you know, I think right now we're at like 51 or something like that for the whole year.
52,
For the whole.
52.
52 for the
By
whole
coincidence.
COVID pandemic, not just 1 year.
Yep.
And then in the past, though, in like 2019, 18, 17, before we had COVID, we were averaging, you know, let's say 20, 25, whatever, a year in pulmonary. If all those are in 2020 that are related to COVID, or at least seem to tie out to our COVID numbers, what happened to all the ones we normally have?
So there's a few parts to that. So one is we're not capturing all the COVID deaths. These
Okay.
are just the ones that were reported to us.
Okay.
So we're going to have less COVID-related deaths than the numbers that you all have because not everyone is going to be coming to us for a jurisdiction. So that's part of it.
When you say that, just so we're clear, so they weren't in Winona County, or they aren't from Winona County, or how does that get
Well, they're not
reported?
reported to us because it's a natural death. So at the beginning of the pandemic, lots of these cases were reported to us, and we were signing the death certificates because we were following all of those cases. Because as you might imagine, that public health interest in knowing, like, here's the first COVID, here's the second, this is the places that they were, you know, where they had been living or residing, and so forth. And then as the pandemic expanded, now it's, you know, it's a natural death. It's being, those positive tests are still being reported to the Department of Health. Those deaths are still being reported to the Department of Health, but they're not necessarily being reported to us because it's a natural death. So that's why the numbers are lower. So the next thing that you asked was also interesting is because our influenza, so what you're seeing here in the background is really year-to-year fluctuations in severity of commonly influenza as people develop pneumonia, secondary pneumonia from the flu. And so where did those other deaths go? They didn't completely go away, but they almost did. So the number of flu cases that we had was basically zero last year. So that was essentially all the precautions that were put in place for COVID drove those.
So we conquered the flu, but not COVID.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. And so, you know, going into the fall, there's a lot, not to get too sidetracked here, but there's definitely concern, like even in June, like RSV, respiratory syncytial virus, which affects young kids, was really peaking early. There's concern about a robust flu season coming up with the strain that's out there. Obviously, people didn't get sick for the things last year, which is good, but obviously now you have less immunity. So there's genuine concern of like, what will that look like going into
Sure.
the fall and winter?
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, no, good question. Yeah, so then I think we're on the last slide now, which is really just a summary of our activities. Our number of investigations is up. That's really reflecting how the COVID cases were. One more slide were reported to us. We had a slight increase in the number of death certificates. We looked at less scenes within U.S. postmortem examinations and a total number of deaths reported to us. one more slide.
Yeah, one more slide. There we go.
So, kind of a whirlwind tour of a lot of information, so.
But the conclusion is that Winona County is a relatively safe place to live.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, because our numbers are,
All things considered, southeastern Minnesota is a good place to be. Our drug overdose rates are way less than most places. Homicides are low. People are living long and dying of natural diseases.
we should put that in the next administrative search that, you're safer.
The medical examiner says.
Says it's
Safer,
safer,
yeah,
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 safer to
yeah,
come live in
Yeah.
Winona
It's a
County
good
than
place living, it's safe, yeah.
Hennepin or
Well,
Ramsey.
these
or-
days it might be.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
work it into our logo somehow.
Yeah,
Ray Tay not to get killed and we'll.
Yeah.
just don't fall.
Yeah, don't fall.
Just don't fall.
Watch
Statistic,
for the
yeah.
bluff.
Oh, the bluffs, yeah.
Careful. Well, aren't most of our, well, some of our assisted livings and such, they tend to build those now on one level. But I think if you drive around town, most of our homes are two-story. So it, it does contribute to falls and things like that. All right. Next, 7.2, receive presentation in lieu of Commissioner's Road Trip. Good morning, Dave.
You still brought lunch though, right?
Well, we'll have to get to that part of the trip and then you'll find out.
We'll stop at the cemetery, right? Right, Dave? We'll stop at the cemetery. Remember that road trip we stopped at the
I do
cemetery?
very much, right on
It
the
was a scenic,
corner of 11 and 13 there. It was
Yeah.
actually a fun stop.
yeah.
Good morning, Dave Kramer, County Highway Engineer. As you're aware, we typically try to schedule a road tour with the commissioners, typically in June. We did not have one last year. This year, we were planning it in June, and we thought, well, COVID's still just a little bit around. Let's reschedule it till September. And then what we didn't know is things were a lot better in June than what they were in September because the Delta variant ramped up. So nonetheless, the decision was made to not do the tour in that fashion and a request to do a virtual tour. So our tour had been scheduled for September 21, 3 weeks ago. So part of 2 days that week, I drove what we were planning on our route, which the route was included in your board packet. I also, as a handout, have that same map, and I've added to that some numbers that correspond with the locations. So as we're basically traveling around, there'll be numbers on the photographs, and that'll correlate so that just if you want to follow along on the map. I've got Troy attending virtually, so if you have any difficult questions, I may defer them to him. And I'm going to try to keep this fairly fast-paced. We typically take pretty much a whole day for this event. I'm going to try not do that this morning. Go a little bit faster without the drag time. So with that, Heidi, next slide. So location 1 is our at the base of the Garvin Heights Hill, our County 44. And again, these, with the exception of where the slides are noted, these are representative of the era 3 weeks ago of what you would have seen. So at that time, the road was closed to through traffic. We had a project where we replaced 5 culverts across the road. And then next slide. Also, at the bottom of the hill, we have an outlet pipe that goes east diagonally across Westlake Boulevard. And so next slide. We actually were able to line that pipe. That's a corrugated steel pipe. We had some troubles with that while we were trying to do it with some debris that was in there, but nevertheless, we were able to get that line. So this is, and I think you've seen this type of a liner on some other projects. It's essentially it's put in place, slipped into place, and then cured. So it's essentially a resin. Like it smells like epoxy. If you've ever mixed up epoxy for a project, that's what this smelled like. This was fairly fresh. They had just put it in and then trimmed it. So that goes about 300 feet, and this line's it's steel pipe that had some serious rust issues, but this should last indefinitely. This project, we included $13,000 of work for the city of Winona. Downstream from that pipe is another one that goes down, basically down the slope from Lake Boulevard and connects to a MnDOT pipe that went across the highway to the lake. Total project cost was $155,000 to do those pipes with combination of sales tax and county levy funds. While the road was closed, our crew did, we, in cooperation with Excel, some tree trimmings and removals to kind of open it up, let a little bit more sun, so it's a little safer in the winter, and then less trees falling on the road. This is a picture of the pipes that came out of one of the cross culverts, which was the bottom one. Our inspector on the project, Jay Bauer, said this was the good pipe.
Wow.
How old would you guess that pipe is?
It probably would be that, yeah, I'm not sure. Probably about 40 years.
Roughly 1964, Dave.
Okay. We're 57, just like me.
Yeah.
Just a quick question, Dave. You're scheduled to appear before the township officers,
Yes, tomorrow.
and will you be bringing this to them?
I was not.
Okay,
I was
the
going to
map?
talk about a couple other
Okay.
things.
Maybe at least the map? Could you make copies for them of this map?
I guess there was a couple other topics I was going to go through with them, and this, I mean, I can. I want to be respectful of their time too.
Well, I know my township officers, they always appreciate knowing what's going on in the neighborhood. And
Okay.
so just even copies of the map, not to go into any detail. And then if they have questions afterwards, they could ask you about their geographic area.
I'll figure something out and bring it.
Yeah, but just at minimal, the map, I think would be appreciated. Thank you.
Next slide. So this is County 17 near the technical college. If you travel this way for a good part of the summer, you would have seen orange cones moving traffic around. That was us. We did a bridge rehabilitation. This is a fairly large and expensive bridge. Slide, please. It has a series of weirs. It acts as a part of the Winona's flood control system. This is Burns Valley Creek. So this bridge the deck was deteriorating, and then also on the underside there were cracks and salt was leaching through. Next slide, please. So the repair was and this is not that bridge, this was a County 37 bridge from a couple of years ago, but just to kind of an idea of what the repair looks like, where the loose concrete, they would chip that out and basically expose the rebar, replace rebar if it needed it, and then an epoxy chip seal. So we did this a half at a time, so they had to do the deck repair, on both sides, let that cure before you put traffic on it, and then do the chip seal. Slide, please. Next slide. Okay, this is a picture of the chip seal. Go back one. Picture of the chip seal. It's actually epoxy that's used to adhere this down, and then the rock. I didn't have a quarter, but there was a Marlboro Light cigarette butt for scale.
Oh, that's what that white thing is?
That's
Oh,
That's what I thought.
That's what I thought.
I thought he was showing us trash, but
No,
okay.
that's just
His marker.
handy thing for scale. So that's
Okay.
a close up of what the surface on the bridge is. It's basically it's got a seal to keep the salt is bad for the bridges, but we salt the bridges because it makes the road safe for the traffic. So this will help keep that out of there and protect this bridge.
How thick is that?
I'm not sure. I think there's.
But it's a significantly different product than when you say chip seal, what we're putting on miles of rural road. This isn't a pack. This is not the same thing at all.
So the chip seal we use on miles of road has an asphalt emulsion, so it's asphalt that's gluing down the chips, and those are bigger chips.
Mm-hmm.
This is a smaller chip, and they're adhered down with epoxy, so it's a little bit it's a higher end chip seal, but it is essentially a chip seal. Troy, do you know how thick this is?
I would say that it's going to be probably like 3/16 of an inch total thickness, maybe a quarter of an inch.
So rehabbing this bridge was $70,000, including the concrete work and the chip seal for both sides. I think that was money very well spent, because this is probably well in excess of $1 million bridge, and I think this should extend the life of it, by several decades in the lease. So I think that was money well spent. Slide, please. So as I was walking back to my car, I was just admiring the roadway here. This has the lightweight boiler slag, chip seal. This was paved back when this road was reconstructed in 2012, and then chip sealed in 2015. Slide, please.
We can't get that black anymore,
Right,
right?
so that material was kind of a byproduct of the power plants, how they were burning coal, and just the technology's changed, and we can't get that anymore. So now we're using essentially aggregate,
Like a lime, kind of.
not limestone because it's too soft, granite.
Granite,
yep.
What gets it
Chips,
red
which
again.
work probably equally well, but they don't stay as black. So this is a close-up. Again, this is a 2015, so this is 6 years old, still in excellent condition. It's a nice tight surface, not letting any water through, and it's got a good texture to it. So it's got good, like wet or frosty skid resistance. It's just really this roadway's performing extremely well and holding up. This has 10,000 vehicles a day on this road. This is our highest volume road, this segment.
Dug out some change from your change box. You got your quarter.
Yeah, so I pulled a quarter out of my car wash stash. Heading down the road to the roundabout at the intersection of 17 and 15 next to Pleasant Valley Church. This was constructed in 2012 when the road was redone. This is a location where we had some median plantings that didn't work as well as we had hoped, and it's been a kind of somewhat of an eyesore and a point of probably lots of discussion as we.
Well, complaints, yeah, I've
Right,
gotten complaints on it.
Complaints. So the current effort right now is a volunteer effort by Bill Carter from Prairie Moon Nursery, and he's working to establish Little Blue Stem. So he did a series of herbicide treatments last year to try to get rid of the weed seeds, and then planted that this spring. Unfortunately, we had somebody else in the area that volunteered to mow it a couple times, which was damaging to what Bill was trying to accomplish with the Little Blue Stem. Slide, please. So we placed some signs to try to stop the mowing. So we've got a couple of these and a couple of different ones that look a little bit different. Slide, please. So this is from the Prairie Moon website. That's a picture of what Little Blue Stem looks like. So hoping that it's all successful, it'll be thick with this plant once he's able to get that established, and it should be this should as a prairie plant. I think it's only a foot and a half, couple feet tall,
Yeah.
if that, and
Yeah.
this should crowd out the weeds.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Once it gets going.
Yeah, and
Once it gets
it'll
going, so
spread
that's
too, yeah.
That's the plan for that, because that's just been, you've heard a lot about it.
Yep.
Heading down the road, location number 4 is our Old Homer Road reconstruction project. Again, these are pictures at the time of the road tour, and I also, when I went and drove around, I tried to pick a couple nice blue sky days, because there's a lot of beautiful areas in Winona County, and it looks a lot even better yet when you got a little blue sky. So this is the west end of the project. You can see some curb and gutter is in place at this location. Slide, please. A little further down the road, you see the string along the side that they're getting that ready to place the curb and gutter on this segment. Slide. So this is a spot that we stopped on the road tour in 2018. So Bob Reese had wanted to replace his retaining wall at that time. That was done at his expense. We made sure it was compatible with our future road project. The county paid for the road patch, basically, that was necessary as part of his project. And the curb and gutter was, we did a little bit of preliminary design to put the curb and gutter at a location and grade that could stay. So, everything else is torn up, and basically what he had done here is, it's essentially done. So all the work is on the other side of the curb. But that just to kind of show that. Slide, please. So as part of the project, we're replacing retaining walls. These are just materials that you would have seen along side of the road. Slide, please. These are the cap pieces that go on the retaining walls. Slide. This is a retaining wall mostly done. That's a private drive there down below it, and that will get repaired as part of the project where it's opened up across there. Eventually, the drain pipe was put in. So this will get a 3-color stain, and it'll actually, look quite nice when it's done. We try to make it something that, if I lived there, what would I want to look at, that kind of approach. You see the metal things that look like culverts, those are basically sleeves for the guardrail that will go up there. So the guardrail post will get driven down through there. That's to keep the guardrail post from hitting the tiebacks that are actually holding the wall in place. Next slide. So this is a photo from sometime earlier in the summer. So this road had old concrete pavement under part of it. In order to do some grading, storm sewer work, and some other things, we basically, part of the contract, we pulled that up. Contractor broke it into pieces, pulled it up, crushed it on site, and reused it. So this is basically shaping the subgrade for the new road bed. Slide, please. Next slide. Click. There we go. So this is where they take their, basically put it, go back one, please. This is the crushed concrete road. They crushed it on site and they placed it back on as the first level of the aggregate for the new road. Next slide. Project included storm sewer. This is an example of storm sewer under construction. So when you see a manhole cover or a storm sewer inlet on the surface, this is the kind of thing that's underneath it. Slide. Yellow there is a gas line, so there's lots of opportunities on a project like this for the contractor to work around existing utilities. Next slide. Got a couple photos of what the retaining walls look like while they're being constructed. So they, those wall panels get set, they have to basically brace them up, and then there's ties that hold them, and then then the fill goes up and they do the next layer. Next slide. A little closer view. So those are galvanized steel, and that's why we have the sleeves for the guardrail post. We don't, if you drive the guardrail post through that, then you're basically damaging the structure of the new wall. So that's what the structural backside of the walls look like. Next slide. So this is heading down the road. Went down Highway 61 and turned up Pickwick Valley. This is on County 7 at the Pickwick Bridge.
Oh, Dave, could you quick before on Old Homer Road?
Yep.
That was how many miles at what price tag?
3.8 million.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Sales tax funds.
Yep.
Troy, do you have the mileage? Can you look that up?
I will go ahead and move on and I'll quickly look it up.
Yeah, no, I can't remember the exact mileage. It wasn't a lot of miles for 3.8 million. I mean, it was.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So this bridge will be replaced next year. We do have the funding secured, including bridge bond funding that was approved by the fall of 2020 special state legislative session plus our CASA funds. We do know that this will be a concern for the Pickwick Fire and Rescue, which is just to the north of this bridge. The county policy, and we don't plan to do a temporary bridge bypass because those are typically 10 to 20% of the entire cost of the bridge. So we'll plan on working with them. We know it will be a concern of theirs, and between mutual aid or changing response routes, and we'll just do what we can to minimize those concerns. Next slide. So the aesthetics for that bridge will be the same as the bridge that was built in 2009 by the historic Pickwick Mill, which got the timber railings, and then the concrete abutments will have form liner and then staining that it looks like stone. So it'll essentially match the aesthetics of this bridge. Nice picture of the mill there again. A nice day. Next slide. So with a virtual tour, it allows us to go off route. One of the things that we typically will see if there's somebody from the planning department who wants to come along on a tour. Sometimes there's things of planning or land use interest that can be talked about or touched on while we're out and about. From a parks planning standpoint, Kay wanted to mention as far as the Apple Blossom Overlook Park. Next slide, please. If funding can be found, again, from a parks planning standpoint, it would be desirable to pave this in asphalt just to improve the the amenities for the park, plus improve the aspect of the mobility impaired or handicap accessibility to get around or to get to some of the, some of the tables.
I think the Parks Committee asked Aaron Lafee to come up with some prices, because if we're working on that, if the county's working on that road, whether there would be so substantial savings to do that parking lot when the equipment was up doing the road at the same time.
So
So,
the county is doing the road in 2023.
2023.
yeah, so we thought it was timely to
So
make that,
if funding can
pose
be
that question.
secured for this and it fits, yeah, there's definitely, ability to,
it's not a huge area.
right. Next slide. Okay, back to, location 7. This is we reconstructed County 12 in Ridgeway last year. This is a picture prior to that work. You can see this is a Methodist church at the east end. The front of the church sits lower than the roadway, so the drainage kind of drains towards the front of the church and then drains around to the back. Next slide. Slide, please. So we actually dropped the grade of the road about 3 feet and actually based that on, we set the grade of the road based on having a nice slope away from the front of the church. You can see where it drains away and basically make their drainage issue go away. We try to do things like that where we can with a road project. Next slide.
Beautiful.
One of the requests from the Ridgeway School, they're on the west end. You see where the school bus is turning in right there. That's the location of the school. There's a ballpark on the south side of the east end of the community, and the students do walk back and forth between the two. There were some segments of this that had wide shoulder that were, somewhat accommodated that, but we essentially built a nice wider shoulder, both sides on the entire length, so they can, walk on the left side facing traffic and, have a place to walk over to the ball field. So we just tried to kind of eliminate that issue for them with the consistent wide shoulders through the community. Next slide. So this is on County 13. This is at the top of the hill where the chip sealed asphalt. There's a short piece of that at the top, and then it would have been a gravel road heading down the hill. This has been auto sealed. There was a request to see our oldest auto seal, which this one is. County 13 and 2 were done in 2016. Next slide. This is just heading down the hill, picture of what that auto seal looks like. Next slide. This is a picture. You can see the road surface a little bit closer. Again, it's in very good condition. Both of these roads, 2 and 13, have been reconstructed with using state flood bonds in the kind of the aftermath of the 2007 flood. So we had constructed nice solid base on these. These were excellent candidates for this, and it's holding up very, very well.
Did you say 2016?
Yep.
Okay.
2016. These were auto seal.
Got your quarter in there too.
Yeah, I got my quarterback out.
That's great to see.
Yeah, just incidentally, go back to the slide. Incidentally, the sandstone there, that's the Ironton, Galesville, Wanawap sandstone. That's a layer that's down close to the Mississippi River Valley. That's sandstone. Next slide. This is location 9 heading south on our County 19, south of Wilson. This road is getting deteriorated. It's not on our CIP yet. We're looking at potentially proposing that it be included in 2016. When we do a reclaim and overlay, we're basically adding 4 inches of height, which with the slopes on the side, we lose a foot of shoulder on each side. This road doesn't have that to give. It's got very little shoulder now, and it's got steep inslopes, so we'll look at proposing this as actually a regrade. Overall, the alignment of the road is decent, but it needs widening to really resurface it. So that's.
You said 2016, you must have meant a different date.
Did I say 16?
Yes, I think you meant May 26.
This is County 19, 2026.
That sounds right.
Okay,
2026 would be the next year of our CIP that will get approved by the county, the last year of our
The
CIP
next
that will
5
get
year.
approved by the county board as part of the budget this December. Next slide. And then continuing to the south, location 10 is the county 19 hill. When we were doing the Odyssey of the hill roads, we looked at this one and thought this would be a better candidate for reconstruction. And we do have this in the CIP for 2024 reconstruction and then paving the following year. Slide, please. Just another picture of that same road
Paving or auto seal?
paving.
It'll be paved?
Yep.
Okay. Nice.
We haven't run that by the neighborhood yet. That's been a neighborhood road issue.
Right.
And
so
Dave's
that-
been aware of
it
that,
was
so.
It was proposed a number of years ago. I think it was using the flood bond funds in the aftermath of the 2007 flood. There probably, some of those same concerns probably come back up, so we'll need to work through those from a public input standpoint, and ultimately the board will decide if we do the project or not.
Right.
Item, location 11 was lunch at Tim's. I don't have a picture because we don't have lunch. Next slide.
Just as an update, I do have, since we're at lunch right now, the, about just short of 3 miles on that old Homer Road project.
3 miles. Okay, thank you,
Yep.
Troy.
Again, this one is probably off route. This is the corner of, this is where County 12 starts and heads to the east, where you're looking west on County 25 at Wyattville. We had a 1 mile reconstruction project from the corner here in town, 1 mile to the west, that was graded this summer. Next slide. So you can see that intersection there and the little stretch in town. We put the first layer of asphalt in it. This is just looking to the west at that it's graded, and we'll leave it as crushed rock.
That kind of where the sales barn is that the intersection?
Yeah, that,
Yes.
yes. Mhm.
Next slide. Just want to talk a little bit about our strategy for seeding the ditches here. You could, in the ditch bottom there's a blanket. It's been seeded underneath that, and there's erosion control blanket, so that's able to, from the concentrated runoff. And then the rest of it is hydroseeded, which is, we like to hydroseed it where because it takes really fast and it's quick and easy for the contractor. And then those are bio rolls. That's kind of the latest in technology to slow the water down, catch a little bit of sediment. And unlike silk fence, where those tend to just linger for years after the project, these degrade and go away. So you just leave them in place, basically. Next slide. Continuing on our route, location 13 is County Road 109. This is a relatively low volume road. It's a county road route, not a CASA route. In really rough shape, and we have it in the CIP for 2025 reclaim and overlay. You see there's a patch there where it's completely deteriorated where our staff has patched that. Next slide. Again, this is just another picture. It's on the same road. So once with the lower volumes, once we do a reclaim and overlay and then put a chip seal on that, we would expect that would last a long time. This is a road where in order to resurface it, the sales tax is just a godsend to be able to fund this type of a project. Otherwise, there's a lot of counties that if you didn't have the sales tax before that was not availability for counties, lots of discussion about unpaving, doing a bond and then paying that off with county levy over a long period of time. How do you fund these things? It's really difficult. But
Joe, what's the volume traffic on that road? Do you know?
it is towards the north end, it's like 200, and towards the southeast end, it's about 55.
And what's the number where you figure it becomes favorable to have the road paved over crushed rock?
Somewhere in the 150 to 200 range.
Okay.
Over 200, definitely.
Okay.
So So this is, from what I've heard from, staff that's no longer with the county, in the 1990s, the county was planning on paving all of its county roads and was, working towards that. And then obviously that came off tracks at some point. I'm sure it was a function of money. So we do have some roads out there that are relatively low volume. They're paved. If you have lived on a road that's been paved for decades, there's an expectation it's going to
It's
stay
state,
paved.
Yeah.
It's-
Not only an expectation, but you may have invested in property along that route because of the surface that was on the road, and you,
That's very true. I mean, people that are looking for a rural homestead,
Yeah.
they would prefer to live on a paved road. That's
but,
a selling point.
for me, I'm thinking of Highway 74 in the state going from pavement back to crushed rock. It's kind of a bait and switch with the community. You've got an improved surface, you might invest in the area. Now we're gonna change that. We're gonna change the deal on you. So.
Right. Next slide, please. This is on County 29, going north from the Lewiston exit off of I-90 up into Lewiston. We have this on the CIP for reclaiming and overlaying next year. It's relatively high volume, just under 1,800 vehicles a day. So it's definitely a need. I don't have a photo in this slide deck, but we're also planning on, we typically do culvert work with our paving projects. With this one, we've identified the culvert just north of the intersection with County 18, which is just south of Lewiston. It tends to water run across the road every time we get a couple inches of rain. So we're planning on upsizing that culvert and essentially addressing that storm resiliency issue to make it so we're not having to repair it so often. Next slide. As we're heading west on County 18, you may encounter the Amish buggy, especially in the southwest part of the county. These are landowners, residents, farmers in that area, very, very prevalent. Next slide. So this was our restroom break at the Winona shop after lunch. Next slide. This meeting hasn't dragged on too long yet, so I'm assuming that's not a need.
You're making good time.
Okay. Location 17 is our County 37. This is northbound, just north of the Fabian Quarry. This bridge was replaced last year with a combination of federal and our CASA funds. Was able to secure federal funds, and it's a really good deal for the county when we do that, but administratively it's a lot of trouble because it's just those funds come with administrative baggage. So you can see the grayer where the segment for bridge approaches that were done with the bridge, and then this was actually, I think, paved like the day before I took this photo. Had we gone on the day of our tour, we probably would have been able to watch the asphalt getting laid on this road.
That's facing north?
That's facing north. Next slide. So a bit to the north on that same project, in the bottom part of the screen there is the brand new asphalt road that's been and then shouldered. Down below is the culvert lining. So this is a steel culvert that's actually being lined. When we're doing these paving projects, we'll take care of the culvert needs. In some cases, it might be that we just need to replace a culvert, and we'll dig across the road and do that ahead of the paving. Sometimes the ends just need to be relayed and riprap. If you have deteriorated steel pipes, but there's enough structure there that we can line them, then we'll line them. And that's what this is. Next slide, please. So this is, next slide. Down looking at that end. So this is I'm thinking probably about a 3 or 4 foot diameter culvert. So they pull the liner through there. It's impregnated with the resin. And then there's 2 technologies for curing it. One is steam and the other is ultraviolet. This contractor is using steam, so they pulled it through, tied the end shut, and they're actually pumping steam in through the other end, and then this end is a pressure relief valve, so they're regulating the pressure and allowing the steam to escape on this side. So they'll cure that and then trim it. So that's, this is the same contractor that did the liner on 44. They just went from one to the next. It's and once it's in place, this is I don't know how long these will last, but they
relatively new technology, correct or not?
Relatively new. I mean, it's been around for years, maybe decades, but
We haven't used it
we've been using
extensively.
it for a few years.
a couple years now, yeah.
And it's, for a pipe like this, you can see part of the project, we included some work at the end of this culvert. We didn't dig up the whole thing, but just the bottom end here, replacing riprap, and it might have needed to relay the end section or something like that. Anyway, it's good technology, and it gives us a pipe that will, that liner won't rust. And it, like I say, I'm expecting 100-year plus life out of these things, hopefully.
Well, and you're not disturbing the soil around it. And in past, when we replace culverts, we disturb the soil and then you get that
Right.
dip.
Right, so when we do that, we do have them slope that excavation back, so when you get that dip, it's very gradual, you might not even notice it. If you have a tall, narrow trench, then it's really noticeable, so it tapers it, but even with good compaction, they tend to still have a little bit of settlement, and there's a trade-off. Some counties like to do their culvert replacements the year ahead, then you've got a patch. So you either need to spend extra money on your asphalt patch, which tends to be about a third of the dollars of the culvert itself. We've taken the approach of doing it with the project, not spending the extra money on the patch, and just, living with the fact that it's not going to be perfect from, as good as if it had a year to settle, but there's trade-offs with all of these different approaches.
But with putting the liner in here, you don't really have to disturb around
That's correct. So that's another benefit. And
it's a
some of these
benefit.
will be in really tall fills.
It's difficult to.
Right, so it's just a lot of excavation to get back down to the pipe. You line it, you haven't disturbed that area.
It makes sense.
It's a good technology. It's not useful everywhere, but where we can use it, it's a very good strategy. Next slide. This is on, again, continuing north on that same road. This is on the hill segment heading down towards Crystal Springs. This was a relatively narrow gravel road that we had out of seal in 2017. While we had a County 26 closed for a bridge replacement project, this was an unofficial detour that lots of traffic was using. We had safety concerns that people were calling about with, people not staying on their side as they're going around these corners. So we had a contractor come in and strike this. We actually, when we were trying to arrange that, had difficulties with getting paint materials. That's been an issue. Like Diamond Bogle that makes paint can't get the resins and the materials that took to make traffic marking paint. So we contacted some folks at Matthew that we work with all the time, and they said, well, we can't get Minnesota spec paint, we can get Wisconsin. Yeah, that'll work. So that's what we marked it and got that marked. You can see there's some cracks in this. In the lower right corner there, you see a dark spot on the road. Next slide. That was this guy, he's crossing the road. So there's a few things in this slide I can point out. One is you can see the close-up of what the Odyssey looks like. You can see a crack there in the, and I would say that's probably at least in part due to all that detour traffic that's on the Odyssey. It's just not necessarily made for that level of traffic. The asphalt that's in this is a softer mix. It's able to heal itself to some extent. So hopefully next summer, when we get a nice hot day, this will meld itself back together and not just break up, but we'll see. We'll deal with whatever happens, but that's hopefully the Odyssey will. The other thing is, I don't know if you know how wide the band is on this little woolly bear, if we're going to have a
Long, hard winter.
Instead of your quarter, you found him.
The safety that we've provided the community with winter driving on these hills is just phenomenal. You can see that the texture of that surface and being able to put the plows right down onto that surface and being able to put the salt and sand onto that surface, all issues with crushed rock hills that we used to have. Salt and sand tends to melt the surface of the road and it can turn greasy and gooey. So you're either dealing with not putting enough salt and sand on and then having ice, or putting so much on that this is just a huge, and it's not over a 10-year period. It's costing the same as crushed rock, but the safety is just so much better. So what a great service to the community.
Our staff that plows the roads, you know, they notice they're able to keep these in way better condition. And if you're familiar with gravel roads, you also know there's certain conditions where they'll get icy and the blacktop roads are fine. It's just the nature of the beast. And these will act more like blacktop roads. And like Commissioner Jacob said, you can scrape them off clean, you can put some salt on them, and it does make a huge difference in whether it's, you know,
And then dust and washboard on top of that, so just, so much better than a crushed rock surface.
next slide. So here's just going just a little bit ahead on the same picture. You can see this chip seal is not as good as the one on 13. We're having to do some maintenance on this, and again, but is what it is. Next slide. This is a little bit further down the valley as the road across the valley on 37, and this is part of that unofficial detour. It's a wide reconstructed, but it's gravel county road. Next slide. Coming out on 37 at the intersection of 26, this is looking west back towards Elba. And in the photo there, you can kind of see a white spot in the road. Next slide. This is just zoomed in. It's kind of grainy, but that's at that time the road was closed for this bridge reconstruction project. The bridge is essentially done. They're working on the approaches. Approaches needed to be paved yet, and then guardrail put in. This road was actually opened to traffic a week ago, last Tuesday, October 15th, which I was very glad about because I noticed there's a lot of grain moving around right now, and this is a main route for the northwest part of Winona County, eastern Olmsted, southeast Wabasha County, that they, you know, haul grain to the Winona terminal. So this is back open to traffic. Next slide. Continuing on our route, number 21 is going cross-country, so to speak. This is on a township road, Bear Creek Drive and Norton Township Road. Just kind of if you're out and about on a nice day, there's lots of alleys like this in Winona County. Most of the townships maintain in the ballpark of 15 to 30 miles. So this miles of road right here is maintained by Norton Township. This is heading cross country to get to County 27 to show our bridge project coming up. Next slide. This is on County 27, Bridge 85-513. At this time, this is our worst bridge.
First one, county.
I'd like to get on the road tour if we have an opportunity, get you down underneath the bridge. This is probably the one that I would have picked. Next slide.
What is that rated ton wise? Have we posted it lower or?
It is, you want to go back to the previous slide?
Yeah,
So you see the sign there. I don't know if you can.
I can't read that.
up here. I think it's 20-some tons for a single unit vehicle and then 40 and 40, but it is load posted down.
Okay, it is down from what,
Yeah.
okay.
Is that the one we took the legislators to when they were here?
The legislators didn't go to a bridge. I would have, if I had time, I would have taken them to County 5, which was the worst one until it got replaced earlier this year.
This spring, yeah, this summer, early summer.
Early summer. So,
But see, that's almost in Houston County, so it didn't count, you know. It's so close to the line.
so yeah, so next slide. So this is a channel span bridge. These are precast pieces, so they have relatively short piers, but relatively quick construction time. So there's the precast pieces set in there. So there's two design flaws with this. One is then it has an asphalt overlay, so then where these pieces are, the road surface cracks, and then the salt that we put on the roads comes down through and gets at the bridge itself. And then was not enough cover, concrete over the top of these rebars that was in the bottom of these. So it was very typical that these have deteriorated like this.
What year was that bridge built?
This bridge was built in 1975.
Yeah, it's not that old.
Right, that for a bridge, it's not that old.
Yeah.
And for this bridge, this isn't even the worst part of this bridge. Next slide.
But didn't we have different qualities of steel and stuff? Wasn't there an issue back in the day when we were importing more steel and maybe the
I'm not
quality?
aware that the
in the
grade of the
70s.
steel or any aspects of
like
the steel was a
it's changed.
specific issue with this bridge, but, you know, it was, I'm sure it was innovative, rapid construction technology at the time. And when I hear people at bridge seminars talking about innovative bridge design, I'm like, I don't want anything of it because they didn't know what the, you know, what the
Long
flaws
term.
of this were. We've got, you know, we've got tried and true bridges that should last 80, 100 plus years. Replacing something that's 45 years old, we shouldn't be doing, but we will.
So I understand it better. I'm familiar with 30, where it meets 116 there. We did that bridge this year.
Same style.
So that's what came out, but when they put the new one in, it was not, there was no like precast components brought into that, right?
And
It was,
precast itself is not necessarily bad. A lot of our bridges use precast.
it was all built
beams.
on site, right?
A
I
lot
mean,
of our bridges use precast beams. The slide that I showed with the 26 bridge, that has precast beams in it. And then it has a poured in place bridge deck. The bridge on 30, we call it a slab span. It doesn't have beams underneath it. The slab itself is a bit thicker and has more reinforcing steel in it, and that's the entire bridge.
but that was entirely built on site, right? There was
Right,
nothing,
And
and I was surprised. I thought in this day and age that it would be, you know,
And those have epoxy coated rebars, so in concrete cracks, and there'll be salt that'll work its way through, and that keeps the salt from getting at the rebar, because once the steel starts to rust, and then it expands, and then it spalls the concrete off, and things go downhill from there.
mhm.
So, that's the same style of bridge as what went in on 30 will go here. So this bridge has one pier, happens to be because of the span length right in the middle of the stream, which catches debris. Because the salt the road material comes down through the bridge, it causes issues for the steel pile. Next slide. So I didn't go down in there and take pictures of the pile, but this is actually from 2012, from 9 years ago. You can see the steel pile is literally rusted through. It's gone. So we can do repairs on steel pile, but with the other deterioration on those channel spans, on those precast pieces, it doesn't make sense. It just needs to be replaced. But this is actually what is the most controlling factor of the loads on this bridge.
Yeah, and this is a frustration. You know, I've had people in the community, they're frustrated about all the bridge work, especially in my neighborhood. We don't have much, our east-west connections were really
Right,
disrupted this
right.
year. And their comments will be, you know, leave me a message that I didn't think there's much wrong with that bridge anyhow. I don't know why we're wasting money on it. But
Heidi, you want to go
yeah,
back 2 slides?
those constituents aren't
One
seeing
more
this.
slide.
It looks beautiful from the surface.
Yeah, on top
When
of
you're driving
all
over
in
it.
good shape, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that's what the
So-
constituencies.
You see this, and
Mhm.
there's, from this vantage point, other than our weight limit sign,
It looks,
Yeah.
there's nothing visibly of concern.
Mhm.
You know, it's a little bit of maybe a rough ride as you get onto the bridge, but
Yeah.
structurally, you can't see from the surface that there's anything wrong. This looks not significantly different than it did in 1980 when it was 5 years old.
Mhm. And that's what they see.
Right.
And
There's
they-
nothing wrong with that bridge. I've
Yeah.
driven over it with
Mhm.
overloaded trucks for the last
Yeah.
10 years. There's nothing wrong with it. I can keep doing that.
Mhm.
You know, you go underneath and you look at it like, oh.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's the kind of reaction
Mhm.
that's part of the dynamic, I guess, but, you know, we'll, keep working diligently to replace these as they come up, but there were, we've replaced 3 channel span bridges this year, including the one on 5, the one on 30, and the one on 26 that I included in the photos. And we had one last year, which was the 37 bridge, which I had in the photos north of the Fabian Quarry. So that's 4 in the last 2 years. This one will be our last channel span bridge. This will be next year, and it'll be flat.
oh, then we're done with that type of,
We're done with that
Construction?
type of, I'm
Okay.
getting emotional just thinking about that.
okay, only one left, okay.
Go ahead, 3 slides. Do we get to a number 23? This is our County Road 129, historical picture, I would say. This is from 2012 Google Street View, but prior to the project. So the county received the petition from mostly the residents in the Wee Valley neighborhood, and you can imagine if they were bicycling or walking into town, walking or bicycling on this roadway with that level of traffic, which is on this end, it's close to 1,600 vehicles a day. There's a lot of traffic in and out. A very big hazard. Next slide. This is just going a little bit further down the road towards the west or north. This is entrance to Bison's Quarry. Again, kind of a before picture. Next slide. This is an after picture. This is what you see on the tour. Looks kind of just like a regular urban roadway. It's got shoulders there that you have either a parking lane or somebody can walk alongside or bicycle, and they can get out of the way and not be having to be in the same space as traffic. So, I think it'll function very well. That's kind of a before and after. Next slide. Just another picture.
Yeah, that's a big improvement.
So this is just,
That's Jim's house on there, right? About Jim?
yes, that's Bob Tim's. Yeah, he's got some flowers by his mailbox. It's kind of a nice spot, so I took a picture. Yeah, this is just west of the entrance to, or north of entrance to the Hidden Valley, the manufactured home park. Next slide. So going down at the other end, County Road 129, the south end where it comes out to 61. The traffic signal replacement is planned for next year. That's getting led by MnDOT, but the traffic signal costs get split by approach legs. So this is 44th Avenue. It's a City of Goodview on the opposite side, and this is our County Road 129 comes out. So it'll be basically a 25% county, 25 City of Goodview, and 50% MnDOT as far as the general cost of the signal replacement. When a project like this, I'd like to take the opportunity to address any deficiencies. In this case, there's kind of like a right turn lane, but not really. So some people will use it, and sometimes somebody will be there and somebody will be in the main lane because it's not really a right turn lane, and they'll both take off and turn right when there's a gap or the light turns green. So in any event, we're having them construct an actual right turn lane.
Not a roundabout? I mean, it just seems to make sense.
Actually,
Because you're coming through-
evaluated a roundabout.
Yeah.
As they, before you put in replace a traffic signal,
Yeah.
Engineering wise, you want to make sure, does this make sense? So they actually evaluated it for a roundabout. Probably the biggest reason it's not suitable for a roundabout is on the opposite side, the frontage road is right tight in, and it just wouldn't fit without buying a bunch of property and doing a bunch of reconfiguration, and then, so, but they actually evaluated that.
That journey on that road will be interesting in a couple of years. The
Mankato.
whole 60, the whole 61,
There'll be one roundabout on 61. but
Right, and then
the
Mankato.
Avenue corridor will
Right,
have.
right. But
3 or
then you
4.
get, multiple stop and go lights. And it'd be interesting.
Next slide. Next slide. And that has us back at our Winona shop. That's the end of our tour.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Dave.
Good job. So it was a busy summer.
Very busy. Construction line.
Good. And can we get that Minnesota yellow paint now?
I don't think so.
So just one of the things in the supply chain that are missing, the marking paint. He said we had to go with Wisconsin paint.
One question for Dave, or maybe Ken, I'm not sure. I'd asked for the future agenda item to discuss developing a resolution from the county board to state of Minnesota on the turning Highway 74 back from an improved surface to a crushed rock road. So is that, I kind of was thinking that would be on the agenda by now. Is that moving forward?
Resolutions are typically drafted by Karen's office, and she's,
I think we're gonna have Dave.
Commissioner Jacob had asked if I would.
Oh,
at
I'm
least get a
sorry.
swing at drafting it.
Oh, I'm
and
sorry,
then
okay,
we
yeah.
can go to the attorney's office for corrections, I guess.
Maybe we'll discuss that at the upcoming road and bridge meeting.
yeah, there's no concern with it. We just, yeah.
All right. Okay. Let's see. Moving on to 7.3, discuss and/or recommend appointment of Citizen Advisory Committee volunteer. And I'll just start this off. I did try and get a hold of this person because I have no idea who they are. And of course, our information was very, very brief. I would prefer to have a discussion with this person before we put them on that committee, because this is a committee we appoint, but then it's like a 6-year appointment. So it's a little different than some of our other committees. Commissioner Kavesi.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I have sat with this woman in meetings for the supportive housing group, and she has a long history of, she has worked in housing issues for a long time, and she currently is a Section 8 holder, so she's kind of a lived experience person. And she keeps up on a number of issues by listening in on a number of discussions, not necessarily in the county, but keeping up with housing issues. So she does have what I would say would be a good background. I don't know, I guess it didn't come through on her application.
You bring up
Lives in St. Charles.
yeah, you bring up a very, it raises a question.
Yes.
We probably need to check with the SEMSHRA board. There is a spot, I don't know if it's limited for somebody that is a user of the programs, and that is currently filled. Now, I don't know if that is just like a requirement or a stipulation or a restriction. I guess I don't know. I didn't know that she was you're saying she is a Section 8 or has used Section 8?
I believe it's Section 8 that she's using. She is under some of the, one of the housing programs.
Okay.
For what it's worth, the same meeting I've sat in numerous times. I'm in that same group. And she does have a depth of knowledge in housing, not just in her own experience, but she participates in a lot of statewide conversations about housing, and is very knowledgeable.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I guess
And
that,
she shares it freely.
Yeah.
that didn't come through in the application, and it
Yeah,
was so
I
sketchy, and like I say,
But
I
yeah, at
called.
least from my experience in hearing her on there, she seems very knowledgeable.
Okay, all right, well then, I guess with that recommendation.
Are you comfortable?
Well, I guess the only thing is if we have to check with again, the SEMSHRA board is run separately from our, criteria. I don't know if it's a problem or not.
Right,
or a
but we
restriction.
wouldn't be appointing her as the person who consumes the service. We would be appointing her as our second county
County.
As a
representative.
Winona
And
citizen.
that,
Yeah.
should be good. Again, SEMSHRA has a whole different set of rules.
Have you tried for some time to get a hold of her, or what's the issue?
Well, after I got the application, then I had to contact personnel to get a phone number, and so I tried the phone number, and I haven't.
It's just been a couple days. a
Yeah,
weekend,
yeah, it's
so.
only been a couple
Yeah.
days.
I don't have any concerns, but I don't think it's that time sensitive if you
Right,
wanted to.
it's been
put it on the
empty for
next
how many
agenda.
years, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I would want to make sure through SEMSHRA that it's, we're doing this. And like I say, I want to say it's a 6-year appointment from Winona County. It's not, it doesn't come up for, so it's a long-term commitment for a person.
If I
And-
made a motion to table, would it come to the next meeting already?
We can, yeah.
Is that adequate time for
Well,
you?
I guess I would like to check SEMSHRA and then check with this individual.
Okay, I'll make a motion to table item 7.3 just till our next meeting.
Okay, and I'll second that. Okay, so we have a motion to table. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, we'll table and we'll expect it to be on our next meeting in October, at the end of October.
Yeah, and just as a point of order, I don't know how the name got mixed up. I believe she's Linda Lee Soderstrom, not that combination that's at the top of her.
Linda Soderstrom, Lee Struttersom?
Yeah,
As if
not
it
all
was like,
that.
maybe there was a
I don't know
spouse's
how
name or
that
something,
happened.
yeah.
Oh, I thought it was maybe,
Oh, got filled out probably.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. But
all right,
Yeah,
okay.
and probably as a further point of order, next meeting, I don't think we should discuss anyone's section 8, whether they're on or not, or I don't think that's appropriate for this board to be
Yeah, I think so.
bringing up publicly.
Well, I'll just
She-
verify with Hampshire what their rules
She
are.
will say that as part of her
Sure,
qualification.
but that shouldn't be our policy.
Well,
Okay.
I'd agree, particularly since she didn't say that.
Okay. Moving on then, 7.4, discuss, consider directing county attorney to prepare resolution requesting state approval of local option sales tax referendum.
So, so I prepared and Karen reviewed and collaborated on the information that's in your packet regarding the potential for local option sales tax to fund the jail bond issues. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing because obviously, you can absorb that as you want. Some of the information in here, one of the things I did put in was just in response to some of the discussions we had at previous meetings, asking about the current bond market and things like that. To kind of get right to the point, the county board has two options really, from my perspective at least, and I've explained them in there, that we can rely on the property tax, excuse me, or the sales tax to fund the jail bonds. The current situation we have is that we have a portion of the jail bonds already assigned to the property tax in the current budget. That's about 800 and, let me take a look at my notes here. Yeah, 864,184 is supported by the property tax right now in the 2022 bond or 2022 draft budget. The question came up of what would we need to cover the entire amount of the bond issue, and the debt service on the bond issue, along with principal payments, is about $1,465,895 a year. It's pretty flat in terms of our payments.
That's for
bonds.
28?
It's for 25 years.
No,
Yeah.
dollar amount.
Oh, it's the total bond issue. If you were just taking that and saying how much was the $28 million bond
28
issue?
million, okay.
Yeah, it would be
Right.
almost $1.5 million.
Okay.
That came to 0.23%.
Well, so then if you go forward, look at the sales tax, yeah, you'd be looking, if you want to just have that amount of money, it would be 0.23%. We had talked about maybe like 0.25% because of the fluctuation in sales tax. If you get any more money than you expect, you can pay the bonds off earlier. If you get less money, then you can just adjust as you go along. So, and given the current health of the sales tax and the growth of the sales tax, and the fact that typically, as you have economic growth and so forth, even if you have a kind of a stagnant population growth, you'd still be able to meet that $1.5 million a year by a 0.25% sales tax. Now, where it gets a little, when you're trying to compare that to what you'd have to do with the property tax, you already have $864,000 built into the property tax for 2022. So you'd need about an additional 3 or 3.25% levy increase to cover the difference between the 1.5 million and the 864 that's already in there. But also keep in mind that because of the way the 2022 budget is structured right now, we know that we're carrying forward some expense because we're using reserves and some other methods to balance the budget for 2022. So you'd be putting 3% on top of whatever cumulative increase, which I think in the last budget presentation was somewhere looking at if things grow like they normally do, expenses grow 3%, revenues maybe 1%, or maybe they're flat, you end up with about a 6%, 6.95, I think was the calculation, percent increase in the property tax next year. So then you have to put 3% on top of that. So even if you were able to cut that back to, let's say, a 3% increase in the county property tax next year, you'd be adding another 3% for jail bonds to make that difference up. So really it comes down to, even though it's about 3 or a little over 3% property tax increase that you're looking at to cover the jail bonds, okay, and then look at the rest of the expenses, or a 0.25% increase in the sales tax, which would then cover the whole thing, allow you to take 894 back into the budget for other purposes. So from a financial scenario, the sales tax is kind of the best way to go from a county finance standpoint. Now, as far as impact on, the public and all that, that's something you guys have as the policy makers have to decide on how that pans out. But just from an internal looking at our budget, what would be best for the budget, adding that sales tax would limit the property tax increase substantially and have a diversified effect on your revenue sources. Because right now, we have property tax, we have sales tax for roads, but we don't have any other revenue really that's dedicated to operations for the county. And those expenses continue to grow. So my recommendation would be to explore the sales tax. Now, there's a process you have to go through, and I've outlined that in the document. You have to, number one, we'd have to have a resolution with the board asking the state legislature to authorize the local sales tax for 0.25%. And then should the legislature decide that they approve that, then it has to go to a public referendum on the next general election, which would be the 2022 November election ballot. And then if the public approves it, it would probably be March when we get the first funds from sales tax. And you can make adjustments. March of 2023. And when you're preparing the 2023 budget next year, all that can be considered, in looking at how you have to work those things out. Keep in mind that when it's time to set the preliminary levy next year, if you have to you have to think about the fact that you won't know if you go down the sales tax road, you won't know if the sales tax is approved yet. So you may have to set the preliminary levy higher in order to accommodate the fact that the sales tax could fail. And if that happens, then you'd have the preliminary sales tax. You have the ability to actually increase the property tax and pay the bonds. You could choose at that time, if the reserves are healthy enough, to just hedge with reserves for that 1 year, but then you'd have to do it the next year in the property tax. And those, I know that's a lot of speculation and a lot of things to wrap your head around, but you should just keep it in mind that you're gonna have to deal with the scenario that's presented at the preliminary tax time. So
No, but just to kind of in simple terms, it's about a 6% swing on our levy is what I'm hearing you say, is we're either going to have to increase by 3%, another 3% to cover the jail, or we could potentially decrease by 3% after it's approved.
Yeah,
So
I think
there'd be 1 year limbo in there that we might have to cover with, next year we might have to cover with reserves, but to me, it looks like it'd be a 6% swing in the.
Yeah, I mean, if you had a scenario where the property or the sales tax was approved, you have for the whole 1.5
Because we've
million.
already approved
Yeah.
for the.
Yeah.
the
So if it was
800 and some thousand.
Right, so if it was approved for the whole 1.5 million or the 0.25% sales tax addition, you'd have $864,000 in the budget that would get freed up.
Mhm.
So that immediately would eliminate pretty much any increase in the property tax for that.
That's what I'm
next
saying,
year.
it's a 3%.
So there's a swing, you're right, so if you look at the alternative, which is adding 3%, plus the rest of the, whatever happens in the budget, yeah, it's a significant difference. That's why I said from a financing standpoint of view, and again, not making any comment on the impact of the different taxing structures. Yeah, from a county finance standpoint of view, it makes total sense.
Questions? You indicated a 0.25% sales tax.
Right.
So is
right.
that 2 cents? No,
Um,
it's a,
No,
you know, it's
well, it
like
would raise
a-
your rate to 7.625 on those. Remember, it's only on those things that are eligible.
Right.
Okay, so some things aren't eligible.
0.25
of a cent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
So I mean, it's less than a pen, it's like a
Very,
quarter,
very
it's like
small.
Dave Kramer's quarter.
Yeah. It
is
is
what
very,
right?
very small, yeah.
Am I
yeah.
thinking right? So it'd be a quarter more sales tax on every dollar.
Well.
No, that's not right
That's
either.
way
No,
too much.
no.
It's a quarter of.
$100,
Yeah.
$100.
Yeah, there you go, a quarter of a cent.
The current sales
So,
tax.
I mean,
is-
so we can speak to the public, so
Yes.
it's, and again, we'll have to have really good talking points. So it would be a quarter on $100, right?
Yes.
And the current sales tax is 7.3, And this would move it up to 7.6 because there's a couple more numbers.
625, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's 7.65, you think about that,
That's
on
$7
$100, that's
on it.
$7.63. That would be your total sales tax. Right now, it's $7 and what, 61
It,
cents.
it's hard to, I guess as my conservative political stance, it's hard to support any tax, but the incentive with this tax is that the better the economy does, the better the payback is, and the sooner the jail will be paid. So it gives you it gives the government an incentive to have a good economy.
And it's,
Rather than when we levy by the dollar, we're just saying, we're taking so many dollars, whether you're doing good or not.
there is, and
And we don't have any other
This is
tie to the
dedicated.
economy like the state and federal do.
right, and this is
Right.
dedicated to the jail bond, and it ends when the jail bond is paid.
Yes.
Okay, so I mean,
Yeah.
that's
The
another
the
important.
Yeah, that's by
legislation
statute.
would tie it to the jail bonds.
So it wouldn't even be an option for the board to say, let's extend this.
No,
No.
no,
So
it's
if you look
tied
at-
to,
If you look at page one, oh, Madam Chair,
yes,
pardon me, I did not have before.
right, Commissioner Meyer.
So on page 130, there's a chart that shows sales tax by merchandise by category.
Yeah.
right? So what you would see is that the two highest categories, but the highest is eating and drinking. So there's a potential to affect businesses, but I mean, especially with the tourism, that means that part of the burden would be shifted to folks visiting Winona. Now, the businesses may have their opinions about whether that's good or bad, but I read in the packet that you and Jail Administrator Buswell have given a presentation to the chamber and that they came back neutral.
Yes. Their policy committee didn't take a stance on it. And we presented this information or similar information to them. And yeah,
And I don't know about the rest of you, but I certainly was months ago contacted by Christy Ransom at the chamber, and this was in fact her idea. So, at least to me, so.
yeah, and again, sales tax, again, is one of those things that's different than property tax in the sense that people from out of town do pay a fairly high portion of the sales tax. Because we are a hub in a way, obviously a smaller hub than La Crosse or Rochester, but you're bringing in people from Wisconsin daily to eat, drink, shop, in this area. So.
All right, so the wishes of the board, do we want to pursue the resolution, the creation of a resolution?
Don't need a motion, do you?
think we
Yeah,
do.
I
Oh,
need,
we do, we
yeah,
should.
we need
I think,
direction to the county attorney
Attorney
to
to
draft
draft.
resolution.
Draft the resolution.
And then
So
the board, we would,
Madam Chair, I
Commissioner Meyer.
feel like it's worth pursuing, and there will be a referendum. So if there's a public outcry against it, then there's an opportunity for folks to express their will. And there's a number of hurdles that we're going to have to overcome anyway, so it may not come to be. But I'll make the motion that we go ahead and pursue this as an option, ask the county attorney to get the resolution ready and start the process.
I would second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Meyer, seconded by Commissioner Kavesi to direct the county attorney to prepare the sales tax approval for jail bonding as one of our options. Any other discussion? Commissioner Jacob?
Yeah, and along the lines of when we discuss tourism in the county, those are all people that come into the county who would potentially have to be unfortunately utilize this. Well, and
No, you're
I'm making
right.
a comparison here to rural acres of land, which is the other way we're going to tax this. And if you have 100, 200, 500 acres, you're going to pay substantially more for this jail than someone who has a lot in town. So this, I mean, it seems like a much more fair way to pay for the jail than to make vacant acres of rural land that aren't, they're only capable of producing so much income to begin with, and this just seems more fair. So
Okay.
yeah, I'd support it.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Olson? Oh, okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay? Okay. All right. And I would say let's keep moving this along because I know there's several other counties that are probably going to be at the legislature asking for different things.
Now,
And
Madam Chair, I know
Yes.
that in past conversation that Representative Pulaski is aware of this.
Hmm.
So
Right.
and he indicated that he was willing to help us. So is the
Yes.
same true of Senator Miller?
or-
Yeah.
in a very brief, yes.
Yeah,
Great, okay.
yeah, Representative Plowski actually gave us some of the information on how to, the process, so.
Yeah, in a past conversation, you sort of
Yeah.
apologized for not doing it faster. I was like,
Yeah.
well, we won't
No,
get
it has
ready,
to be,
so.
it has to, the next milestone is really, well, you do the resolution, then you have to submit it to the, I can't remember which
Office
person in the
of-
legislature, but
Yeah,
in January, so.
right. So I think we need to move it because like I said, I know there's several other counties that are facing
Yes.
building and
For-
looking at the same.
Completely different reason. I was talking to someone from Rice County and they are considering the exact same thing.
I did notice on the list, thank you for providing that list of organizations that applied and if they got the bill. And the 3 public safety issues did get approved through the legislature, whereas some others didn't. So hopefully that'll still remain a priority.
Yeah, public safety. Okay. All right, 7.5, receive monthly financial update. Is Pat out there?
Online, yeah.
Good morning, Pat.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. We'll be going over the August cash flow. So August in the general fund starts at 13.8 million. Actual revenues are 339,000. Actual expenses are 1.7. Ending cash is 12.4. For the whole year, started out at 14.3. Actual revenues were 12.3 million and actual expenses were 14.1 million. Ending cash in August was 12.4 for the general fund. Variance in the general fund was a negative 1.8 compared to a negative 3.0. The total for the 4 funds that are being presented was a negative 2.1 compared to a negative 3.7. I do want to point out that human services is a negative 559,000 at the present time, but this is actually better than last year. Any questions on this document?
No, go ahead, Pat.
If not, we'll go to the summary cash flow. Summary cash flow starts out at 18.5 million. Actual revenues were 27.3. Actual expenses were 29.3. Ending cash is 16.4. Variances in this document is a negative 2.2 million compared to last year's 3.7 million. Any questions in this document? If not, we'll go to the summary budget. We're through the month of August, which August is at 67%. Looking at the funds that are being presented, the only one that and expenses that is actually over that percentage is human services. Human services is almost at 70%. It's at 69.94 compared to August through August would be 67%. We are, we're keep on monitoring all these funds and trying to enhance revenues where possible or reduce expenses where possible. So we hopefully have a positive year. I also did want to point out that we were budgeting 250,000 for the year for interest, and at this point we're at 124,000, which is at 50%, which is actually lower than our 67%. But interest is kind of it all doesn't come in at the same time. So hopefully, again, as we go through we will end up what we planned for our estimate for the year. Any questions on this document? If not, thank you.
All right, thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Pat.
Yes.
Yes, we just wanted to make the board aware that we just completed our third quarter billing. So yes, we are standing at a negative at the end of September. We just completed our third quarter billing, which will mean with that significant revenue will be coming in the fourth quarter for.
Good. All right, good. Good.
Your budget looks, it continues to look better and tighter every year that I've been in office, this is, you know, you're still not quite neutral, but
Yeah.
I mean, far better than what I, from 4 or 5 years ago, it was.
It's much better, yeah.
I watch it like a hawk.
Budget neutral would be a goal.
Yep.
Well, and I think that's to be commended for doing it during the middle of a pandemic.
Yes, yes, thank you. All right. Moving on then, Commissioner Kavesi, you had a committee report?
Yeah, I had a committee report from the WinLAC yesterday. We completed a lot of business, including finishing the mission and vision statement. We had a presentation on forests and water quality and the importance of including that in the One Watershed, One Plan. And we have more cropland, but almost as much forest land in our area of coverage. So that was an important one to hear about. We discussed the We Are Water exhibit, which is set for next March and April. So we're on task, on time for that. We finished 2 pieces of information, the land and water resource narrative and the issues table. So the next steps are to prioritize those issues and continue the public meetings for input. So we're moving along.
Okay. Just one quick announcement. The township officers are planning to meet tomorrow. No, Wednesday night.
Yeah, tomorrow night.
Oh, yeah, tomorrow. Wednesday.
I suffer from that myself.
Yeah, today is Tuesday, Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. And so I know Mr. Kramer is scheduled to be there, and they always are interested in our road projects and their road projects. All right. No other business to come before the board? Entertain a motion to adjourn?
Do we?
Well, we adjourn, but do we come back, then do we open and then come back and close?
Maybe a question
Okay.
for Kevin.
Or do we just
If
adjourn?
they need to take an action after the closed session, they have to come back, obviously, in the open session.
I don't think we adjourn. I don't think we adjourn until
Sometime-
after.
Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't.
Well, I noticed on the agenda, there's no
Action request.
action afterwards. So, but I thought we were intending to have an action.
But it's still supposed to be a part of the official county board
Right.
meeting today.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. You would just,
So you
I-
want
I
to just
believe-
recess?
My belief is that we make a motion to go into closed session
Session.
and then we come back and adjourn.
I don't think that'll get us in trouble.
And to be honest with you, I can't tell you because I'm subbing out the different attorneys coming for the closed session.
Okay, sure.
Alex Tillman.
I think Alex can advise us on that. the
Yeah,
question.
So,
well,
'cause
if we just, I don't think that'll get us
He
in
was coming
trouble.
for the closed session, so.
If we recess and go into closed session and then come back and adjourn? Okay, so Commissioner Jacob,
I'll make a motion to go into closed session to discuss litigation strategy and options pertaining to awarding contracts for the detention equipment scope of work.
motion to recess made by Commissioner Jacob, seconded by Commissioner Olson. Any other discussion? All those in favor of recessing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, we're recessed.